To be cringe is to be free. Probably Confucius. Hi, this is Two Girls, One Plot.
So we're happy to have you back with us this week. We are doing Chapter 2, The Vanishing Glass of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, not Sorcerer's Stone. That's wrong.
Mind you, we are recording this episode on May the 2nd of 2026, which means that if the world of Harry Potter was real, exactly 28 years ago, the Battle of Hogwarts would have concluded.
So, in the present, if that was real, most of the main characters would have receding hairlines. Unless there's the Sleek Easy potion, but then there's also, a hair transplant spell to just keep it going.
Wizard hairlines.
Wizard hairlines, yeah.
Okay. Do you think this is something that Gilderoy Lockhart would have done because of his ambition? We're going way ahead of ourselves, but I feel like this is something that Gilderoy Lockhart would have done because we are given hints that he's actually wearing wigs.
Yeah. It's interesting, the things that J.K. Rowling is like, yeah, you can totally do that with magic, but a hairline transfer.
Also, apparently, you can't mend bones with magic.
No, you need, what's the thing that Madame...
Skele-Gro.
Yeah, Skele-Gro.
Yeah. So we're starting with the Chapter 2, The Vanishing Glass, which you should know, people. Yesterday, I finally got my hands on the Minalima editions of the first two books, and they have just the amazing illustrations. It's just wonderful. I am just in so much awe of graphic designers and people who work on set of films and create the whole visual world, because those two people as lead graphic designers of the sets of all the Harry Potter movies basically sole-handedly crafted all the visuals on screen, from the way the letters are going to be. We're going to go there. We're going to get there next chapter. Everything from the way the handwritten letters look to the actual packaging of the Weasley's Wizard Weez's products. They've crafted everything. And I have just a huge respect for those two people. They are a married couple now, so great. They met on the set.
Oh, that's cute.
That is really cute. And so in the Minalima edition, once we open the Chapter 2, The Vanishing Glass, we are met with Harry's dream of a flying motorbike and a huge figure on top of it, which is supposed to be Hagrid. We know that. But Harry doesn't know that. So we are getting a little short recap of how nearly 10 years of Harry's miserable life at Dursley's has passed. We also are given the knowledge that Dudley is actually blonde, which was not accurate in the movies, but in the new show it is actually going to be accurate. But I feel like actor who played Dudley, yeah. I feel like his portrayal was pretty good.
Yeah.
Especially taking into consideration he was a child actor too. I actually liked him in the Queen's Gambit really much.
I think he acts well as an adult.
Yeah.
Which not all child actors do because it's a different style of acting.
Mm-hmm. That's true. But he also did pretty well as a child. I don't know. I feel like it takes a lot to portray this kind of a git.
Yeah. Portraying a villain is a lot harder, I think.
I don't think it's a villain because he doesn't think he's a villain. He's just an entitled little piece of crap.
Maybe the heel is the better term here. The wrestling term, the heel.
Maybe.
Do you mind if I give a synopsis for our
Absolutely.
gentle listeners? So we open onto Harry Potter as a 10-year-old boy, and we are immediately shown his life in contrast to that of his cousins. His cousin Dudley is loved too much by his parents, to the point where it's clear that their constant affection and indulgence is going to be bad for him as an adult. They buy him massive amounts of presents. They adore him. They put his photos everywhere, and they have Harry living in a cupboard, and they do not like him. It is Dudley's birthday, and he is going to go to the zoo, and they were going to put Harry with Mrs. Fig. Remember her, she'll be important later. But Mrs. Fig has broken her leg, and they don't know what to do with Harry. They're desperate to try and find somewhere to put him so they don't have to take him on this zoo day with Dudley. But it's too late. Dudley's friend arrives to be taken to the zoo as well, and they have to bring Harry. Harry's having a pretty good day at the zoo. He accidentally gets ice cream because the woman who's selling it asks Harry if he wants some before the Dursleys can take him away after they've bought ice cream for Dudley and his friend. And he also gets Dudley's leftovers of some sort of dinner dish, ice cream. I'm not sure.
Are you talking about the Knickerbocker Glory?
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
I looked that up because I have a note right here on the page that says a what? And apparently it's some kind of a sundae slash trifle that's very high layered. The picture that the Google gave me was looking like a trifle slash sundae, strawberry, and a lot of whipped cream type of stuff. In Russian book, it is translated into chocolate cake, though.
I feel like I would understand that more. I understand
Right?
why they just...
Even I feel like to anyone outside of Britain, like explaining what the hell is a Knickerbocker glory.
Yeah.
So, and apparently this Knickerbocker has nothing to do with the knickerbockers we see in the next chapter that Dudley's wearing.
Great.
Because in the next chapter, Dudley's wearing his new school knickerbockers, which apparently is like the golf shorts type of pants. But this Knickerbocker glory is named after a guy whose last name was Knickerbocker. And this is so confusing. So I'm fine with chocolate cake. I'm fine with incorrect translation here.
So Harry thinks the day's going pretty well, but he's realizing that Dudley and his friend are getting bored at the zoo. And we've learned from the chapter that Dudley and his friend like to beat up, bully, physically abuse Harry. So he's a little wary. They go to the reptile room, and it's mostly boring. And Harry, after the two boys have looked at a massive snake that didn't want to move, goes and talks to the snake. Of course, he's not talking to it expecting it to talk back. But then it does. And he feels very sympathetic for the snake. It's stuck in this little container. It is bred in captivity. We find out it's never seen Brazil. And then one of the boys, I think it was Dudley, sees Harry talking to the snake, and the snake has moved from its lax position to talk to Harry and immediately shoves him out of the way to see the snake. Harry is very upset, and suddenly, title drop, the glass vanishes, the glass between the snake and Dudley. And then the snake escapes. This creates quite a kerfuffle at the zoo. And as we learn, I love this line. The director of the zoo gives Aunt Petunia a cup of...
Sweet tea.
Sweet tea, yeah. Or strong tea? Strongly sweet.
I feel like it's both strong and sweet.
Yeah.
Which I know personally from my own experience in Russia, we do that when you have some kind of nausea, like some kind of stomach unsettling issue.
And then on the way back, Dudley's friend really hits the nail in Harry's coffin because he mentions Harry was talking to it, the snake. And Vernon Dursley and Petunia Dursley, who are aware of Harry's magic, none of us are, neither is Harry, immediately assume this is something Harry did on purpose. And they lock him in his cupboard without food while Vernon needs a glass of brandy to calm down. And then it ends with Harry pondering as to how miserable his life is and how he knows there must be something more because sometimes odd people greet him in the street and seem to know him. Wouldn't it be nice if one of them was a relative?
Yeah. I have to argue, though, with one point you said. We know that Harry is a wizard. We, as the readers at this point, we know that Harry is a wizard because of the first chapter, because he was delivered to Dursleys by wizards, and we know that his parents were wizards. I am actually really surprised by the lack of any photographs of Harry in the Dursleys' house. I don't know if surprise is the right word. Is just a little bit concerned about that because people like Dursleys would like to project a certain image of themselves as a family onto the surrounding people, neighbors, colleagues, friends, relatives. I know that taking in their orphaned nephew probably already seems like a very charitable deed. However, how much can you pretend, for how long can you pretend that you care when you don't?
They're being honest. They don't care. I think something, though, is interesting. So the chapter starts out with noting how Privet Drive, number 4, hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is the photos. And you get the idea that the Dursleys are happy things haven't changed.
So they're the kind of people who need stability.
Stability. And like later in the chapter, we hear about Uncle Vernon, what he likes to complain about, which is the council, the bank, taxes, that sort of thing. Council, for those not in the UK, is like your city, your municipal government sort of situation. And they are aggressively middle class. they live in the kind of suburbs. They have a car. They like things to stay the same. Like when people make suburban life seem evil, I think the Dursleys are what they're kind of thinking about. Maybe I'm looking into this too deep, but there's a quote from George Orwell where it says most people who argue for socialism don't love the poor, they hate the rich.
That is interesting.
Yeah, because the idea is that they don't like that someone else has more than them. They're not thinking about the people who don't have enough.
We can see that a lot with how that translates into what Uncle Vernon thinks about a lot of things and how strongly he feels about them.
Yeah.
Throughout all the books, actually.
It made me, why I thought about it for this chapter is that Uncle Vernon is the middle class caricature that people who are cool urbanites, they would hate.
Oh, yeah.
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 And
So the get-ups and as we see later on about the motorbikes, oh my God, those hoodlums, damn. Which I feel like it's a very interesting word to me, like hoodlum.
So in Russian, the word hooligan was
Yeah.
translated like from English. It was used by the language. And it's still used normally. So when I was trying to learn Russian and someone would casually use the word hooligan, I would just be like, that's an old-timey word.
We still use it to this day.
But yeah, so I just felt that Uncle Vernon, like the hatred of Uncle Vernon, not him in particular, but his middle classness kind of felt like the line of you don't love the poor, you hate the rich. In this case, the rich being middle class people. It's like, I don't like Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia as people, but their lifestyle is their choice. I'm sure there's perfectly nice suburban people. Do you know what I mean?
Bet. And I like how Aunt Petunia very unceremoniously wakes Harry up. And up until the point when Harry finds his socks and pulls a spider off one of them, we just assume that his room is suspiciously close to the kitchen. And then we're like, oh, that's not a room. No, that's a whole cupboard under the stairs. And he's not afraid of spiders, which we will see later translating in the story a little bit better. I feel like at this point of life, Harry has very little to be afraid of. Maybe we also know that this is something that translates into the story later on. All the presents that Dudley gets.
39, sweetums.
39 after they promise him 2 more.
Yeah.
But a second TV? What for? Like, why do you need 2 TVs for yourself?
We know from later in the book that he kicked in one of his TVs.
But that one was broken in the spare bedroom. Mm-hmm. So that makes me think that he has one that's working, and now he's getting a second one that's working too.
I think it's meant by the author to show the overindulgence. Yeah. Like, why do you need a second TV?
Also, I feel like this translates into the racing bike because Dudley hates sports and for some reason he still needs a racing bike. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's just because it's cool to have a racing bike. And Dudley is supposed to be cool. I do like that we get pointed out at first here that Dudley couldn't often catch Harry. And I have a note right here. I'm like, Saker in the making.
It is interesting. So something that was a bit on my mind is that, like, first and foremost, if you read this chapter, there's a lot of "isn't Dudley fat?" comments. Just constantly being fat is constantly used to show that somebody is fat or lazy or whatever. So just FYI if you're sensitive to that. But the other thing which I did wonder about is Dudley's gang. We don't really know anyone beside Piers, who comes on the trip, and Dudley. And I'm just like, you guys couldn't get a fast kid in your gang to catch the other fast kid?
I would assume Piers could be the fastest of them.
But his job is holding the arms. Holding arms behind people's back.
I'm pretty sure another kid could have done that.
Yeah.
And here we're getting a description of a grown-up Harry of 10 years old with thin face, knobbly knees, black hair, and bright green eyes. And his round glasses are held together with a lot of sellotape, which is a British word, which I personally like much more than Scotch tape or duct tape. I don't know, sellotape has a flow to it. Mm-hmm. And also there is a very interesting play on the word later in the book. I'm running ahead again, but we know that there's a thing called spellotape later, and that's really funny. That's really fun. When we first get the idea that Harry is wearing glasses, this is a tangent that my brain went on. I was like, okay, so Harry is wearing glasses. That means that he had to get a prescription at some point. That means he legally exists in the Muggle world. That means that the Dursleys legally, through the Muggle means, had to obtain custody of Harry. So how does that work? I know, first of all, this is the first book. The world is not fleshed out entirely. Second of all, JK is not really good in those details. But just to think about it,
it's fun to imagine them having to go to a registry and just being like, this is our nephew, our sister and brother-in-law died. He's ours now. And they're like, sorry, did a court sign off on this?
How did they die?
Oh,
Why don't we have any records of your
brother and sis.
Yeah. Why don't we have any records of someone named James Fleamont Potter anywhere in the system? It doesn't exist in NHS.
Does your nephew have a birth certificate?
Does he have a birth certificate? So we can assume that Lily, as a Muggle-born, she absolutely exists legally in the Muggle world. She absolutely exists in the NHS. Harry has to exist in the NHS and legally. And I think that Vernon Dursley would not miss on the opportunity to get something tax-wise from having another dependent in his household.
So I've been thinking about this. So the UK has private eye doctors. So I feel like Vernon Dursley is the type of person, because he's very coded as a Thatcherite. He doesn't like the NHS. And also, they're going to ask these sort of questions. How did they get this boy? So he's taking them to a private optometrist, cash only. I'm joking. They could probably pay with credit card or whatever, if they had credit cards in the UK in 1980, whatever. But I feel like they went to a private optometrist to get that done, because can you imagine the NHS asking questions? Why does this kid look so malnourished?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because at any doctor, at any annual medical checkup, which should be performed at school, which Harry attends, which he has to legally have all the documents to attend the school.
Oh, this is a cultural moment. In the UK, they don't have annual medical tests for students.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
Why?
Listeners, in Russia, they do an annual medical test on the student.
Yes. Prior to starting the school year, we do have medical assessments just to make sure that you don't have lice.
No.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is a free country, the UK. You can go to school with lice and give it to the other kids, because that's what you can do with freedom, Senya.
Freedom. Okay.
Yeah. It's free. It's not freedom from lice. It's freedom to give lice to other kids. Yeah.
I do love that. Yes, my question was like, do wizards legally exist in the Muggle world? And if you are a half-blood, what are you doing? Until some point, until 11 years old, because Hogwarts only starts at 11 years old, which is when the secondary school starts in the UK, as we learn from the next chapter. So what do you tell other people around you that you're sending them to St. Brutus's?
Hey, just probably say I'm sending them to boarding school.
Any boarding school. But also, if you're a half-blood, we know that wizards generally, it is widely assumed that wizards generally do not suffer from Muggle diseases. They do have their own set of wizarding of magical maladies. And if you are a half-blood, which is a made-up status, I want to just make emphasis on that. This is a weird thing. But also
You either are a wizard or you aren't.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that works. I don't know if it has any implications on the biology, like physical biology of the body of the wizard.
It's not that deep, bro.
Shut up.
Anyway.
Okay, anyway, so do you just get both ends of the stick? Can you get scrofungulus and cancer?
Apparently, yeah.
So, and what do you do?
You die.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Natural selection, apparently. If you were a Death Eater, you would say that this is natural selection, apparently.
Yeah. And we do not condone that.
We do not. I have highlighted the line about that Harry actually likes his scar. That is an interesting point that I wanted to highlight.
I feel like that's a really gendered thing where boy has scar is cool. Like scar on face is cool, whereas if girl had scar on face, it'd be like, you should cover that up. Maybe go see a dermatologist. Oh, there was something, or sorry, do you have a reply to that?
No, I did not.
Okay, so one of Dudley's presents is a gold wristwatch.
Yeah.
And I had so many. So, okay, I was like 11 or 12 when I got a watch for the first time. And that was quickly replaced by a phone. So I did get a watch in order to tell the time, but it was not a gold wristwatch.
I did have a wristwatch at some point, but I lost it and it was nowhere near gold. It was from the market. It just looked cute. This is why I wanted it.
I remember mine very well. It was black, but with orange numbers, and the arms were a really nice orange color, like a pumpkin orange. And it was Roots branded watch.
Oh.
Yeah, I remember how much it cost as well. It was $79.99.
Oh, Canada.
Yeah, Roots, baby. For our Australian listeners, we don't mean it in that way, okay? It's a very popular clothing brand.
Yeah, and the logo is a beaver.
Yeah. But so I thought about that. Okay, gold wristwatch. I guess that goes in with how much they're spoiling him. But then I was like, is it gold plated or like
solid gold?
A wristwatch doesn't work if it's solid gold. That's too soft of a... Even if it's like...
Yeah.
So most gold, I'm sure, do you know the carat system? Most gold isn't purely gold. It's mixed with something else to give it some stability. But I'm just like, it has to be gold plated. The amount of actual wealth needed to buy an 11-year-old a watch like that is ridiculous. So it must be
I
gold
agree.
plated.
Yep.
Yeah. Or is it even just gold the color? We don't know.
We don't know. Maybe it's just 10K watch.
Yeah. Maybe
so
it
it's
is.
like it's a low grade gold or something like that. But again, it would be too soft. One bump and it's dented and all that. Then we learn that Aunt Petunia tells Harry that his parents died in a car crash, and I wonder how that must have felt for her. And then she follows it with the don't ask questions, which is the first rule for a quiet life with the Dursleys. Don't ask questions, which this is how you kill critical thinking.
Yep.
Don't ask questions. We are asking questions, and that's why we're here. Hello, this is Two Girls, One Plot.
We asked the questions no one wanted, but now they know they needed them.
We ask questions that nobody else asked, or everybody's asking, but just are too embarrassed to admit it. Whatever. And then I love how Uncle Vernon barks at Harry, to comb his hair, which apparently the famous Potter hair, is almost a genetic trait, a condition of sorts that passes down the male line.
I feel like books do a thing that we can never do in visual media. I mean, usually can't do in visual media, where they're like, he looked just like his father. And then in a film, in a movie, unless you're doing a father and son actor who happen to actually look the same, it doesn't work.
No, usually it doesn't work.
So when they're like, oh, they had the same hair, and I'm like, neither Daniel Radcliffe nor that actor who played his father in both of the flashbacks, or any of the flashbacks, had hair like that.
Yeah, and I remember, so recently I've been on the internets, as one does, and I found out actually the actor who played James Potter in the flashback from Snape's memory used to date Evanna Lynch, who plays Luna Lovegood. And I'm like, okay, none of my business, but a cool fact. Harry thinks that Dudley looks like a pig in a wig, and I wrote a little note here that says Miss Piggy, which is a pig in a wig. This is the only depiction of a pig in a wig I know.
I think we also have here the first mention of magic, where Harry's hair keeps just growing back no matter how much they cut it. It grows back quickly. Now, that at first doesn't seem like magic. It's really confirmed later when Aunt Petunia cuts off most of his hair really poorly, and then it grows back the next day because Harry didn't want to go to school looking like that.
Oh, I want to quote that. Once Aunt Petunia, tired of Harry coming back from the barber's looking as though he hadn't been at all, she had taken a pair of kitchen scissors and cut his hair so short he was almost bald except for his fringe, which she left to hide that horrible scar. And the note I have here says, read it for me.
Slav cut.
It is a Slav cut. We're running ahead a little bit.
We are, yeah. Going back to my Thatcherite references, we have Uncle Vernon thinking Dudley's almost temper tantrum about the amount of presents shows that he wants his money's worth, just like his father, which kind of has a greed is good.
Yep.
Do you know the film reference, Greed is Good?
No.
Okay. So it was from this movie called Wall Street, but it became epidemic of this neoliberalism 1980s mentality where it's like greed is good because if you benefit individually, the country benefits. Spoiler alert, that's not true.
But also, I do like that Harry, foreseeing the coming tantrum, just starts wolfing down his bacon because he has priorities. That's what I wrote, has priorities. And I am just appalled at the amount of nicknames that Aunt Petunia is coming up with for Dudley, because Right here I have written, the hell is Popkin?
Doesn't she call him Sweetums at one point?
Sweetums, Diddy Duddykins.
Diddy Duddykins.
Yeah, it's just the amount of those stupid names she comes up with, which are very coddling. They're supposed to be sweet, but they come off as really cringe.
That's also the excess of them, along with the excess of presents, very clearly tells you that this is a boy who is spoiled, and it is not good for him.
Oh, yeah. I do like the depiction of all the presents in the Minalima edition of the book. For our gentle listeners, I do have 3 copies of the book on my lap right now. The English one, the Minalima, the illustrated one, and then the Russian copy, which is closed at the moment.
So, we're going to meet someone who's very important, Mrs. Fig. She is a neighbor, a presumably single woman, who lives alone, despite being called Mrs. Fig, implying there was a husband at some point. And she has a lot of cats, and the Dursleys like to put Harry with her, have her look after him when they're doing things. And when that happens, Harry is forced to look at albums full of photos of all the cats she's ever owned.
And in the Minalima edition of the book, we do have the portraits of all of those cats, along with several cats surrounding a very eccentric-looking Mrs. Fig, who's wearing cat slippers. And most of the cats look like they could be Maine Coons, which we learned from Pottermore, actually, that they are half nasals. And yeah, apparently those look a lot like Maine Coons.
It is interesting that we learn that she has broken her leg. We do not learn how until later. And so for those of you who know, and I don't understand why you would be listening to this podcast if you haven't read Harry Potter already, but I don't know, read it before. This is a reread podcast, okay? Anyway, so for those of you who know, Mrs. Fig is a squib. She had wizarding parents, at least one, and was born without magic, and so she lives in the Muggle world. Now, this becomes apparent to us in the 5th book. And before then, I don't get the impression that J.K. Rowling intended her to be a squib. I think this was retroactive. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think a lot of authors do things retroactively if it makes sense.
I'm not sure about that, actually, because there is a tiny small detail that her whole house smells of cabbage, which is incorrectly translated in Russian into zucchinis. And apparently the smell of cabbage is a telltale sign of somebody brewing Polyjuice Potion.
Really?
It is.
But she's a squib.
Can squibs brew potions?
I feel like no, or else wouldn't everybody be brewing potions? Or is that just what chemistry is? Is advanced chemistry? No, it's not, because you can't polyjuice yourself with chemistry. Anyway, sorry, I'm going on a tangent here.
It is a question then in itself, but it is a tiny little detail here that, I don't know, maybe that also was retroactive because we're not introduced to Polyjuice Potion until the next book. So that could have been true, what you said, absolutely.
So this brings me to my theory. J.K. Rowling is a gardener. Do you know the difference between an architect and a gardener in science fiction fantasy writing?
The gardener is usually the killer.
No, just tell me you don't so I can explain it to you.
Okay, I don't.
Okay, an architect is someone who figures everything out beforehand. They have their world building down, they have the plot, they figured it out. So they've essentially created the book before they've not started per se, but before they've started writing, essentially.
So they have a pretty solid skeleton for it.
Yeah, an architect. Now, a gardener is someone who plants seeds and sees where that'll take them. So they have an idea and they start writing, but then they might mention something, and that's a seed they plant. And then they might later in a book go back and be like, I could actually turn this into something and grow that seed into another a concept or character or an idea. Very famously, Brandon Sanderson, who, if our listeners are aware, is a very famous fantasy writer, is an architect. And then another very famous fantasy writer, George R.R. Martin, is a gardener.
Not a very good at that one. His garden has been abandoned for a while.
Okay, he has too much money to have the effort to work, whatever. We will constantly mention that J.K. Rowling's not that good at world building, but we have to keep in mind that this book was not meant to be like a huge fantasy novel. It was a kid.
She wrote that book because she was poor.
Yeah, and this meant something to her. It wasn't, and it's very much written in like the Ronald Dahl style of British kids writing. So I give her credit because she started to garden later in the book. She said, what can I take from the earlier books and turn into something more plot relevant, more
Like Sirius Black?
like Sirius Black, like Mrs. Fig?
Turned out pretty serious.
Ba-dum-cha. Yeah, that's my argument that J.K. Rowling became a gardener later in her writing career. And I would say later, i.e. second to third book.
I still believe that second book followed that Roald Dahlish storytelling. Starting with third book, it becomes a little bit more fleshed out. Because I think us, just like Harry, by the time of being in this wizarding world for about 2 years at this point, get familiar with a lot of concepts and a lot of what's going on. So maybe it was time to get a little bit more serious.
Serious, you say?
Badamcha. So we see very frustrated Dursley couple because nobody seems to be able to take Harry for the day of Dudley's birthday. Not Mrs. Fig, not Marge, not Petunia's friend Yvonne, who is in Mallorca.
And we will never see or meet her again. I'm shocked that Petunia has a friend, but yes, she does.
Do you think they're like rat friends? They're like, hey.
Like they share the tea.
Yeah, the tea. They spill the tea. Also, as I mentioned to you yesterday, going through the Minalima edition, Petunia here in the first illustration ever we see of her has bright red nails, and I feel like she would never have bright red nails. Never, ever. That's too vulgar for Petunia Dursley. Too unusual, too bright, too much character.
It's not very normal.
Thank you very much. Harry tries to convince them to leave him alone at home, which I don't know what's the big deal because I've been home alone ever since I was like 6 years old.
I was also left home alone, but apparently they're worried Harry is going to blow up the house.
That's if they sense something. Uncle Vernon is refusing to leave him alone in the car, which I written, what could he have done to the car? And also, isn't that illegal?
You're not allowed to leave a pet in the car.
Why would you leave a kid in the car?
Also, the UK is hot in the summer.
It's June.
It's a gross hot. And if you've ever been in the UK in summer, it's not like a fun, cool, warm. It's like a muggy, gross hot. I feel like they could have killed him if they did that.
So for that, probably good thinking, Uncle Vernon. Here, Dudley is called Dinky Diddydums.
Ma'am, you didn't say it's Dinky Duddy Dums.
Oh, Dinky Duddy Dums. I'm sorry. And he pretends to cry, which is really working on Petunia.
Okay, do you want story time?
Story time.
Okay, so when I was a kid and I got hurt or I was upset and I would cry, I would feel that I was like stopping crying, but I would still feel the pain, like the emotional or physical pain. And so I'd just be like, no, keep crying. You need to show this pain. So I would be like,
express yourself.
I was artificially maintaining my crying in a similar way. And then when I read this, I was like, oh my God, do other people do this? Of course, I never did it to get anything. I just did it to be like, I'm still in pain. You should all know that I am still in pain.
And everybody should be in pain with you from your crying.
Exactly.
We find out that Harry couldn't believe his luck because Dursleys could not figure out where to put him. And so they take him together with Dudley and Pierce Polkiss, Dudley's friend, to the zoo. He is smushed in the back seat of the car with those two boys, and Vernon threatens to lock him in the cupboard until Christmas if something goes wrong. I wrote here, it's June! Hello?
And this is our introduction to Harry and magic. So we have Harry listing off the different times that strange things had occurred around him, but that were not his fault. Like the one time we already talked about where Petunia cut off his hair, gave him the slab cut.
The slab cut.
And he didn't want that and was so upset that the next day it all had grown back. And then another time, Petunia had tried to force him into a revolting old jumper of Dudley's, brown with orange baubles.
Which really doesn't look that good in the Minalima edition. It really is horrible. Is this what baubles are?
I was wondering, because I thought, is this the British way to say baubles? B-L-E?
No, I think it's a way of saying pom-poms.
Okay. Interesting.
In my opinion, I don't know really.
Wait, we gotta ask, what does the Russian version describe it as?
It says circles.
Okay. I feel like that's accurate.
So it says that, because this is the second mention of baubles in this particular chapter. First, describing Dudley's hats with baubles. This is why I thought those are more like pom-poms. But in the Russian version, those are called just chepchik, which is like a general name for any kind of hat for a toddler.
Okay.
And then baubles in this particular occasion is described, it's translated into just circles.
So this revolting sweater shrunk to the size where it could only work on a finger puppet. And Aunt Petunia, who didn't want to see magic at work here, said, well, I guess it shrunk in the wash.
Should have used a delicate cycle.
And then another time when Harry was running away from Dudley and his friends, called Dudley's Gang in this book, he suddenly came up onto the roof. Didn't know how he got there. Is this also seeker foreshadowing, Xenia?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I love that Harry to himself explains it as it must have been the wind. Also, I wrote here a little note. So, as we now know, this is the way that Dursley treated anything unusual happening to Harry was by punishing him for that. Little did they know this is how Obscurus happens. So they really were trying really hard to create a really dangerous magical being. And luckily they did not succeed because Harry, I don't know, reading this or the next chapter, I came to a conclusion that he really has some kind of a really strong base character, some kind of a strong substance inside. Because a lot of kids in his position, in his age, they would have already been broken. They would have been unstable. Mental issues would have been apparent.
It's so how Harry reacts to the insanity, which is the Dursleys. Like the line you brought up where he sees the temper tantrum happening is, I'm going to eat quickly because this is going to be over soon. And how he interacts with them at the zoo where I'll just walk a few spaces away from them just in case and things like that. First of all, in the serious note, that's like child abuse. But
Child abuse.
This is very Ronald Dahl-esque. We've talked about that. For those who don't know, Ronald Dahl is a British author of children's literature. Some of his works you might know as Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or Matilda. And he had these very magical realism like versions of childhood. Think about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, that sort of thing.
Or the Grinch.
Yeah, where it has cartoon logic, where this sort of abuse doesn't really matter as much, and this abuse has a bit of the Dickensian book sort of thing. Oh, a little orphan boy who's treated poorly by all those around him. It's awkward to read because I can tell at this point it's meant to be like a exaggeration, like a cartoon amount of violence.
Because swinging a frying pan at Harry at some point, gosh, that happened to me, first of all.
Yeah, but your mom was horrible.
Not nice. Not nice.
Yeah, your mom was horrible, and it was only the failings of the Russian state that you stayed with her. But anyway, it's weird because there isn't a lot of physical abuse, but the fact that, so we'll jump forward really quickly. The chapter ends with him being locked in the cupboard, and he's like, I gotta wait till they all fall asleep to sneak out and get food. And within the 7th book, he'll talk about how he handles not eating well because of his periods of starvation at the Dursleys. The reason why I think this was not meant at the time to be taken seriously by the readers, because Harry might be small for his age, but he's not malnourished, and he 100% would be malnourished if this was...
True.
Yeah. So I think this is part of the awkward transition that J.K. Rowling had to do from a Ronald Dahl-esque magical realism children's book to what we would consider now a more adult fantasy world.
And I would say that this became more serious in the 3rd book when there is a very serious implication. But
Yeah.
Serious keeps on coming up all the time. When Aunt Marge visits in the beginning of the 3rd book, she constantly berates Harry. She says horrible things about him and his family. And she gets really what she deserved. But this is when, to me, I felt like it starts becoming really real.
Yeah.
It starts becoming, because this is not comical anymore. Well, maybe the fact that Aunt Marge's dog treed Harry for half a day is supposed to be comical.
I had a question about that because maybe this was like my memory playing tricks on me. I so clearly remembered that being mentioned in this chapter, but I did not read it in this chapter. Does this come up in this book?
No.
Okay.
So this comes up in the Half-Blood Prince.
Okay, yeah.
Or in the Order of the Phoenix when Harry tries to learn occlumency from Snape. Snape sees that memory of him being on the tree.
Yeah. So maybe this is also, again, J.K. Rowling being a gardener where she's retroactively putting in horrible things.
Yeah.
But I concur with the statement that started off this whole tangent, that Harry has a strong sense of self.
He does. He has a really strong... In Russia, we do say an internal steel rod is just something that allows him to bend and not break.
And it's shown to be good in the way that kids are good because they're not necessarily kind. The things that how Harry describes his cousin Dudley isn't the nicest. Now, to be fair, Dudley is not a character deserving of sympathy from another 11-year-old boy at this point.
True.
10-year-old boy. But as an adult, you can look back and be like, okay, maybe some kindness could have been needed here. But also, he's so kind to the snake.
That's true. This is something that I've also noted later on during the trip to the zoo. Uncle Vernon yells at Harry that motorbikes don't fly, but also you didn't have to yell about it. That's something that deserved this reaction. I feel, dude, you're going to give yourself a stroke like that.
Something I appreciate that these books did that I find that a lot of modern books don't do is they'll have normal font and then be like, that person yelled. One just committed to all caps. They're like, motorbikes don't fly.
In multiple versions, and in Russian too, it's all caps, motorbikes don't fly. And you can practically feel the spit flying into your face and be like, oh, dude, back off. But yeah, here we come to the zoo where we are greeted with the ice cream and Knickerbocker glory that we already discussed before that apparently was not big enough for Dudley. But judging by the picture of it, how much bigger could it be? It's a sundae in a tall glass. Hello?
Something else that I really liked that I forgot to is that the first interaction with the snake and Harry is the snake winking at Harry.
And this is what I wrote here. Snakes don't have eyelids. And it is... I'm sitting here with my veterinary degree.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, snakes don't have eyelids. What they have is this membrane that acts as an eyelid to clear off and add moisture to the eye. But they don't have eyelids, so they can't blink or wink. So, yeah, it's interesting. What I wrote here as well is that Harry has already a surprisingly great sense of justice and empathy when he talks to the snake. I do love that how casually he starts the conversation with the snake. It's like nothing weird is happening. He's just segueing into this conversation. Just talking to a snake is so casual. However, in Russian version, he addresses the snake in honorary you.
Ooh, okay. For our listeners, that's a formal.
That's a formal you if you wrote you with the capital Y. So he addresses the snake with respect.
So it is, I think I see how Harry was eased into the magical conversation. So it starts with the wink that is biologically impossible. The snake jerked its head towards Uncle Vernon and Dudley, then raised its eye to the ceiling. It gave Harry a look that said quite plainly, I get that all the time.
So the snake literally rolled their eyes.
But it's not like a conversation. So at this point, Harry's anthropomizing, I think that's the right word, the snake. And then he talks back, like anyone who's ever owned an animal talks back to them. And then the snake nodded. And at this point, Harry, without any hesitation, just ends up having a conversation with the snake. Except the snake doesn't actually talk. The snake then jabs its tail at a little sign next to the glass, the boa constrictor, Brazil. And then Harry asks another question, was it nice there? And then the snake again points at the sign, and Harry sees that it was bred in captivity.
Bred in captivity,
So the snake never actually talks to him.
Until at the end it does. This is also, I know that there was a lot of theories about this particular snake being Nagini. Then bred in captivity, it couldn't be Nagini. We know now she was a woman. She used to be a woman in the 20th century. So not possible.
I appreciate you bringing that up because this was so heavily theorized that for years I was just like, sorry, was there something in this chapter that I missed? Was this secretly Nagini? But yeah.
There was a theory at some point this was Nagini, but again, bred in captivity, not true, could not happen. So yes, and then suddenly when Harry is shoved down to the floor by Dudley, which apparently would have been pretty painful because, ouch, he's huge and Harry's small, and the floor in the terrarium would be concrete. The glass suddenly vanishes.
It's also wild. He's not just shoved. Dudley came waddling towards him as fast as he could. Out of the way, you, he said, punching Harry in the ribs.
Ouch. As somebody who had cracked ribs, I can tell you that would hurt.
But not even just shoving them out of the way. He punched him in the ribs. And so I see that we were both correct here. The zoo director himself made Aunt Petunia a cup of strong, sweet tea.
Yep. Also, I have noted here that the snake wanted to go to Brazil after gaining freedom. So the snake says, Brazil, here I come. Thanks, amigo. I'm pretty sure that's Spanish.
It is. It's not Portuguese.
Yeah, but also then I wrote here a little note saying, how?
I also had that question because I'm like, I think the snake's going to get caught before it leaves. Is it going to get on a plane?
Or on a ship, on a cargo ship? Like, how would you get to Brazil, little snaky snake? It's not like it's a little snake, it's a huge boa constrictor.
I also wonder, so like we know that some animals in the wizarding world have higher level of intelligence.
Yep.
This is a regular snake. Do all snakes naturally have a high level of intelligence enough to have a conversation, to learn how airplanes work, to get on an airplane, to go to Brazil, to realize that they don't speak Spanish in Brazil, learn Portuguese and have a good time and meet a nice lady boa constrictor? I don't know.
Near the Amazon River. We don't know whether this boa constrictor was a gentleman or a lady.
That's true. Maybe I'm thinking about this too much, but that's the whole point of this. We're thinking about this too much. But yeah, there was a lot here where I was just like, yeah, that doesn't really make sense, but it was fun. I loved it as a kid.
Oh, yeah. And then the boys start making up all those weird things that didn't happen to them with the snake. Dudley says, oh, it almost bit off my leg. And then they start going back home. And yeah, Pierce does spoil the rest of the day for Harry by bringing up that Harry actually talked to the snake. And Uncle Vernon thinks that this is unacceptable. Then we get another recap of how Harry's life has been at the Dursleys for the past nearly 10 years. His attempts to remember what actually happened when he was a toddler. We know that he remembers the flash of green light, which we know has nothing to do with the car crash, and the pain in his forehead, and imagines what if there was a relative and some unknown relation, distant, and...
He's in Azkaban, Harry. He's thinking of you.
He's doing his waiting. 12 years of it! And one thing that I couldn't make another note that the Russian word pizdets for this passage here, which the Russian word for pizdets loosely translate as to holy fucking shit. Probably have to bleep that out. But his aunt and uncle never spoke about them, meaning Harry's parents. And of course, he was forbidden to ask questions. There were no photographs of them in the house. And I was like, Petunia wouldn't have any photographs of Lily in her house.
Okay, tell me if this is a movie-only memory for me, but Aunt Petunia has that moment where she goes, you lost a mother, but I lost a sister.
That was an extended edition. That was a cut-out scene.
Yeah.
That never happened in the books, actually.
Yeah, that's what I thought, yeah.
It was only in the movies. I felt like they should have left it in because it gives a little bit more flavor and background to the character, because in the movies, we don't really get that feeling about Petunia at all, because again, what doesn't happen in the movies is Dumbledore's conversation with the Dursleys in the end. It also doesn't happen in the movies, and this is when we learn a lot about how actually Harry ended up with the Dursleys and why they took him in. So I feel like movies did them a little bit dirty.
I feel like the Dursleys are something that couldn't really exist once the books had matured to a more nuanced view of the world. They're very much the Ronald Dahl characters, and it's hard to bring them into anything more serious without thinking about the realities of how Harry grew up. Now, in a note of levity, I want to mention that this chapter mentions a bald man in a very long purple coat had actually shaken his hand in the street the other day and then walked away without a word.
Do you think the same thing that I do? Is that Kingsley?
I wasn't thinking that at all. What I was thinking is, okay, so it doesn't look like Turkish Turkish. I was going to say Turkish hair, like Turkish hair, but it doesn't look like there's a magic hair transplant spell.
But I was thinking that this kind of falls in with the description of Kingsley Shacklebolt later on. Also, I was a little bit perplexed by the amount of times that people looking weird, wizards, would be in muggle places, of all places, like a bus, which we know that wizards don't really need, and when they need one, they do have their own kind of a bus. So the amount of times Harry would run into wizards dressed as wizards in muggle spaces. To me, what I wrote here in my book, you can see Order of the Phoenix keeping an eye on him.
I think if J.K. Rowling was a gardener, yes. And
Right.
we're making the argument that she is a gardener.
I would say so myself. And doesn't Harry recognize a couple of them later on in this book?
Mm-hmm.
Probably.
I want to talk about the actual construction of this chapter because it's not very long. It is, let's see, it's 8 pages at the most. And it tells us exactly what Harry is, who he is, and what his life is like. And it does it in what I think is a really effective way. I will say that there's a bit of tell, don't show in this chapter, but not just a bit. There's quite a lot. But the reason why I think that's appropriate is J.K. Rowling knows we're not here for his miserable life with the Dursleys. We're here for the wizarding school. We're here for the magic. So all she needs to do in this chapter is establish
To show us what
Yeah.
he's getting away from.
Yeah. So, and for that, she does a lot of telling. But even the stuff she does with showing is really good. The contrast that Harry has with his cousin tells us a lot about Harry. It tells us that he's kind, that he's good, that he's clever, like he can observe things, and that he has a survival instinct. Things that will be consistent throughout.
And the strength of character, which is arguably something that actually allows him to resist the Imperious Curse later on.
And he's someone who doesn't, yeah, like you said, strength of character. He's not falling apart like any normal boy would. And we also see through the contrast between Harry and his cousins, and we get to see how horrible his aunt and uncle are to him. He's being heavily bullied at school. The school's not doing anything. The aunt and uncle aren't doing anything because it's their boy who's bullying them.
What really surprised me is that the school isn't doing anything either. Because, yeah, there have to be teachers, there are educators there who have to react to those kinds of things, but they don't.
And also, you would presume that they're going to a somewhat nice school. Like, if the Dursleys are so well-to-do middle class, like, it'd be weird that they wouldn't. But anyway. And we also see how Harry, though he's, I don't want to say content, but he knows what the situation, he knows the situation he's in. He's trying to do it, play it for the best he can. But he is still just a little boy who wants something more. The chapter ends with him dreaming of someone to take him away from this place, and how at home and at school he has nothing. And it reminded me a lot in structure to, and I'm not joking here, A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. For those of you who don't know, this is an exceedingly famous novel that came out of Soviet Russia, which describes a day in the life of a man in a gulag. And in that, you see a very horrible day by any normal standard, but for him, it's quite a good day because he gets an extra serving of soup. He gets to smoke part of a cigarette. He doesn't have to work as hard as he usually does. It's like a way to soften the blow of how horrible this place is, where they show us, the reader, a good day in this man's life. And I think J.K. Rowling has done something similar here, where for a lot of this day, it's pretty good for Harry. He gets to go to the zoo. He gets to talk to a snake. He gets ice cream and a Knickerbocker glory. It doesn't end well because he's locked in his cupboard, but he seems very familiar with that. But it's, I think, an effective storytelling tool to convey a really horrible situation without having to show how horrible it is. So that if you're reading it on the surface, you're like, oh, that's bad. And then when you're reading it a bit deeper, you're like, that's bad. And also, this is a good day.
This is like the best day so far, because before that, he's never really participated in anything this celebratory, I would say. So this is how this chapter closes, with nobody likes to disagree with Dudley's gang. this is quite a depressing chapter, even if you think about all the good things that happened to Harry there. But yeah, I can't help but think about how miserable this life is. And this is an interesting setup for what's happening later on. This is actually something that we saw a lot of in the trailer of the new HBO Max TV show that is going to come out this year, in which a lot of people arguably would want to see in this contrast between the Muggle world that Harry is getting away from to the wizarding world, which is nothing but dangerous to Harry, but also amazingly wonderful and loving.
There is something, though, I also want to note about the construction of the chapter, and it's done in a way that really appeals to kids. I actually remember distinctly the line where I'm just like, Harry is like me and I am like Harry. Now, gentle listener, my parents did not abuse me. I want to make this very clear. The Dursleys often spoke about Harry like this, as though he wasn't there, or rather that he was something very nasty that couldn't understand them, like a slug. Where parents will often talk over kids or not understand that kids can observe and understand quite a lot. The idea that a 3-year-old doesn't understand when someone's upset at them is, I think, silly. I think there's just a lot of 3-year-olds who don't care that someone's upset with them. Kids understand quite a lot. So when I read that as a kid and saw 2 adults having a conversation about a boy like that boy wasn't in the room even though he was right there, I'm like, oh, I understand that because my parents have had conversations about me in the room like I wouldn't understand.
But also in the Russian translation, the word nasty, like a slug, that doesn't exist. So it was replaced with the notion that they talked about him like he was incredibly dumb, not smart enough to understand that they actually talking about him.
I think that conveys it a bit better. Yeah. And I've talked to other people and I've heard their, like, how they got to Harry Potter, and some of them had really horrible bullying stories, like that they were heavily bullied. And this chapter really meant a lot to them in the sense that it brought them in. And a critique often leveled at Harry Potter is that it's just a story, like a self-insert character. But I would argue that Harry actually has a quite defined personality.
That is true. And this is probably something that I mean when I'm talking about the messaging in this book, because a lot of the small details that J.K. brings into this book, a lot of them are controversial. A lot of them, if you think about them a little bit more, they're but still something that a kid would read at the surface level in this book really allows them to relate to Harry and feel better. Yeah. So this is the kind of messaging that I'm talking about when I'm talking about the good messaging in the Harry Potter books.
And it's also really well done in the sense that it's not like all kids are equal and deserve love. It's someone going through something horrible that a kid can relate to and therefore not feel as alone. And that's worth 1,000 all kids are wonderful and deserve love sort of announcements. So I think that this chapter overall, I think it's good for a couple different reasons. One, we've established that J.K. Rowling will garden. She's not a great world builder in this book, but she didn't have to be because this wasn't expected to be a massive series. But she's going to garden, and she's going to try her hardest, and we respect her for that. We also see that she's read classic Russian literature because she clearly mimics the day in the life of Ivan Denisovich. And we see that she understands how to make a kid feel less alone.
Which is, I feel like, a good note to end this episode on, because wouldn't we all want to make some kid feel better and not alone? There are so many kids in this world who are not in the best situation. Thank you for being with us for this horrible episode, the chapter 2 of the Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, The Vanishing Glass.
We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.